Okay, so today we are going to focus on wiring up the switches of this laptop. So as you can see, there are already some resistors here. How it is there's a bolt here, there's a bolt here, here and here, here and here, and there's a resistor in between there. And rather than soldering them down, I can just twist them in between the two bolts. So there's not a bolt here and here yet, so we should get to doing that now. These are just standard size, I believe they are number 6 bolts drilled through the cutting boards. We just have the resistors there, and we're gonna wire like a bare piece of wire all the way across here, and that will be 5 volts connecting directly back to the circuits. So we can push this through the hole, and it just fell down, but it goes through the hole. And we can do another one. I have a lot of bolts on these connected to all these nuts, but okay. So this setup should work nicely for all of them except for the spacebar, or what used to be the spacebar, which is right here. As you can see, all these are parallel to each other, but this is not parallel to anything. So for that one, we can just wire it up separately. It doesn't need to be on a grid. But these other ones, being on the grid, would work nicely. As for the potentiometer, I think I'm just going to wire that directly to the circuit, possibly with longer wire extensions. And it's important to note that the Arduino would be mounted onto the base platform lower down here. So there will be a lot of very long wires. That's why we have to minimize the amount of wires that we use. So we're ready now to add, they're just 10K resistors, which is what you're supposed to use whenever you want to connect a switch to an Arduino. The purpose of this is so you have no floating pins, that it's either pulled up when it's connected to the resistor or pulled down when it's actually being turned on and off. The resistor so you don't make a short circuit. And that should be enough. So these are on now, but you can just secure them down. Now that they're on, we can get some nuts and just put them on. The nuts just go right on there. These bolts are long enough so we can put multiple layers, because each of them is still going to have wires connected to it. And another bolt. After we do this, I would like to program it to sense some of these buttons. We're gonna forget about the potentiometer for now, just because that requires a little bit more setup. All these buttons work basically the same. So we can just assign the button a value and then input that into the Arduino. So let me finish. So as you can see, I finished all these. Let me finish the rest of them and then we'll get back to the video. So let's get some actual wire now. So this is going to be wired all the way in between these. So we got to give it some extra space because it's going to loop around. And some extra space so you actually have some insulated wire running down from it. So if you got this, some more, maybe a little bit less actually. This, we're gonna go with this amount of wire. Not actually measuring it properly, but that's fine. So it's 2 wires, but we only want to use one at a time, so we're gonna split it open down the middle. Just splitting open this wire. Now we have to strip it, and we're gonna have to strip quite a lot of it. You can do it in multiple segments until it's long enough to reach all the way around all of the bolts. Still not long enough. Let's do a little bit more. And here. So you can see this is actually going to run all the way in between these. It's a little hard to see on camera, but it is there. So just loop it around, and then as we get to the next one, we're gonna loop it around, 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 and loop it around. We have a little bit of excess wire, but we can just trim that off later. So we only have one 5-volt wire going to this. Actually, when we do wire the potentiometer is going to need 5 volts. So instead of going in our wire, you can just take it from here. And we're going to have ground too. That can go separately. So all of these wires are going to have to come down by themselves, and everything's gonna have bolts on them over again. And there's also the space bar. Maybe we can just leave that out for now, or we can use one of these other bolts. Actually, let's try to find out something we can do for that. So for that one, the space bar, I was thinking about wiring it directly to the Arduino, but instead what we're going to do is we're just going to use a longer piece of wire instead of just the resistor, and we're going to go through this other hole right next to the previous one. So while we have such a long piece of excess wire for the 5 volts, it would make a great opportunity to just figure out what we're going to do for the space bar. And we do have another resistor, but the resistor is nowhere near long enough to go all the way from this screw to this screw. But we can just twist it there and run a little bit of an extension. So we're going to do that, connect this piece of wire to the screw, and then we're ready to do the top half of the rest of the wires. We'll see that in the next part. Okay, so I already wired up most of these, which are the wires going to the Arduino. I just have to do this one, plus the spacebar. So just to demonstrate that, what we do is I stripped back a piece of this wire, and I'm gonna wrap it around in this direction, so when I screw it on, it doesn't come off. If I wrapped it in the other direction, the motion of the bolt against the nut would make it unscrew. So just to do it like that, I can tighten this more later, but I just need contacts. So last one, it works the same. Just peeling off some wire, and then we strip it. This is the one that will go through the last of these connections, wrapping around. And then here. And now for the spacebar. This wire is a bit longer than the other ones, so they can all end at the same place. But we just gotta strip it back and do the same thing. A lot of this is repeated motions because we have so many keys, and that's why it would have been difficult to make a full keyboard, or at least one with all the letters even out of that. So now that we have all of these, we gotta make something that can connect to the Arduino, because if we just plug in this bare copper wire directly into the headers of the Arduino, it'll be likely that they might just fall out. So we're going to use the ends like this pin. So, and we're gonna solder this down so we have a little pin, and the pin is thicker than the wire itself, so it would stay in better. So to do that, we got some pins. We're just gonna break off one like that, and we want to use the slightly longer side on the top. So the first one we're gonna do is a spacebar. So just strip it back. And across the longer one, we can just wrap this very tightly. We have to wrap it, the tighter we wrap it, the better of a connection we could possibly have. Okay, so there, now it's wrapped tightly. But we still need to solder it down. So if we just place this, and we can get some solder, as well as, this would be interesting to hold, but you could just put it there and get soldering ready. And it just goes on like that. So, see, we did it like that, and the other side of this doesn't really have that much solder, so let's add some more. We might be using a lot of solder, but it should be fine. Okay. So we have one pin for your DIY pinners. So we just want to bend this. So we have a little extra of our pin, so we can just chop it off. And later we can put some hot glue here to insulate this wire. So the spacebar is done, but we still have a bunch more of these wires to do. So let's just do that off camera.